Antonio Gramsci didn't really like opera. He also made it clear in the prison notebooks that he was not always a fan of Verdi. Part of his concern was the popularity of Italian opera and the apparent influence that the music and librettos had on the masses. According to Lorenzo Salvagni, Gramsci recognized that the popular classes picked up certain melodramatic tones and attitudes with passion and sincerity, to the point that they became incorporated into the language. In other words, the music, sounds, and message had a certain weight to them. They held value, with potential influence on social classes. And this was largely due to their mass appeal and essentially becoming common knowledge in society. Let's fast forward about 90 years and think about other sounds, such as game sounds, and how they may have been picked up by the popular classes and have found their way into mass media. I'd like us to listen to this soundscape from a Major League Baseball game, posted this past March on Twitter by the Cleveland Indians, after MLB decided to postpone the season due to the coronavirus pandemic. Now, I'm not sure how much influence this sound has on everyone, but certainly it has value, although that value may be viewed differently from different entities. For example, in 2016, Nintendo moved to trademark the Mario coin sound, recognizing its value to the company. This, of course, met with backlash from many members of the populace for various reasons, including Cleveland Indians fan XC Warrior, who valued the sound for a different reason and feared that it would be taken away, commenting, "No, the Cleveland Indians use the Mario coin sound every time they score. They have for like 3 years now. They'd better not take that away from them. And, well, I want to hear a Mario coin sound every time the Indians score." With the vast appropriation of game sounds and official game soundtracks into mass media and mass culture, I've begun to think about how these sounds may also have acquired values, and whether they may hold influence over the masses or even define classes. I am exploring several questions. Can these sounds serve as a type of currency both within and outside of games? How might we be able to understand the value of these sounds to varying degrees, and how might these values be exchanged for something else? Is there a way to compare and measure the relative worth of game sounds against each other during gameplay? These are big questions that I can't answer in 20 minutes. Furthermore, multiple areas of inquiry lend themselves to these questions, such as the following: sound collectibles. For example, think of all of the songs that one can acquire in Ocarina of Time, and also scholarly works such as Sarah Pozderek-Chenevy's paper on Assassin's Creed and the collectible sea shanties. How do companies value and use game sounds in comparison to the composers or performers? Is it possible that some sounds are privileged, thus creating class divisions? And how do you feel when you hear the Final Fantasy victory music? Doesn't part of the recent work by several scholars on nostalgia tie into how someone values sounds, perhaps on an emotional level? Is it possible to analyze these sounds and uncover their value in exchange for their ludic payoff? Obviously, as this current work in progress is intended for a much larger project, this presentation will only be focused on the last question that I posed. One way to measure the relative value of game sounds is to couple it to any possible ludic potential. That is, do the sounds help drive the playing of the game forward? Admittedly, this might be complicated with the notion of player intent, but we'll have to assume that the intent is to ultimately move the game ahead toward completion of a given task. I'll proceed through two analytical examples of gameplay. The first is from The Legend of Zelda: Skyward Sword. As is the case in many Zelda games, Link often acquires a musical instrument and must use it in various ways. Do the sounds produced by these items have ludic value? Probably, otherwise why have it in the game? But it also depends on how the player uses these sounds. What if Link simply runs around in circles, playing the harp? Though that might be fun for a time, we could say that this audio has little or low ludic value. There is no skill involved in moving the game forward. The sounds are not exchanged for anything else of value. Link can find special locations that, when using his harp, can uncover goddess walls that can generate usable items like bombs, arrows, rupees, or fairies. Though perhaps slightly more useful, the exchange is optional, and again, the only skill needed is to find the locations of these secrets. There are also instances where skill in generating the sounds, really the rhythms, is necessary to have a successful exchange. After Link destroys a chandelier to obtain a heart container piece, he must pay off the damage with various tasks. One of which is to pay off the debt musically. Thus, the value of the game sounds is higher. Link's music making acts as a type of currency, where apparently paying off the debt with the world's currency, rupees, won't suffice. Still, this encounter is ultimately optional. Finally, there are times when Link must use the harp successfully to further the game. The ludic exchange is obligatory. These examples from Skyward Sword offer a sense of general comparisons of game sounds and their relative values. For the remainder of the presentation, I'd like to turn to my second example in order to do a more detailed account of how we might measure the relative worth of game sounds. I'll do so with an analysis of gameplay from Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! I will briefly set up the clip that we'll watch. Multiple scholars, some of which are presenting this weekend, demonstrate various aspects of either speed running or blindfold running of games. Often, successful runs are based on at least two primary factors: pattern recognition and a reliance on audio cues. In this roughly 90-second clip, we'll see the runner Sinister 1 play through the second encounter with Bald Bull at the 2014 Awesome Games Done Quick charity event.
All right, I gotta be careful. Can't get knocked. I think you can only get knocked down 3 times by this guy, and then that's it. And I already took 1 knockdown, so let's see how it goes.
I won't get into the trash talk dialogue prior to the start of the round. I'll leave that for another discussion, although I do think it's interesting, especially in light of Elizabeth Medina Gray's paper on early video game dialogue, presented earlier today. In the roughly 75 seconds of gameplay, there are approximately 95 sound events. though these events come from only around 20 distinct sound effects and 3 different musical cues. Sinister One's successful completion of this fight is dependent on pattern recognitions, which include rhythmic patterns, as well as sonic cues. For this analysis, I've divided the scene into 3 different cycles based on the 3 knockdowns of Bald Bull, as well as an introduction and what I'm calling a coda. Each cycle is comprised of multiple phrases based on cadential points or pauses in the overall progression of aural events. For example, the first phrase of the 3rd cycle has 3 sonic events: Mac swinging, Mac hitting, and Mac achieving a star. Separately, they sound like this. Though in the game, they happen very quickly, so it sounds more like this. I recognize that any analysis like this is somewhat subjective, so I'd like to offer one possible way that we could begin to assign value to game sounds based on their ludic potential. Of these 3 sounds, Mac's swing has little value because it is simply produced in response to the player's action. The second sound, Mac hitting Bald Bull, would have a higher value. Why? Because that sound relays important information regarding moving the task toward completion. The exchange is the knowledge that you've connected a punch. The 3rd sound, the star, could be valued even more, knowing that the star represents a more powerful attack that can be used later. The ludic payoff is greater. My analysis of these 3 sounds in this brief phrase offer increasing comparative values. If we want to expand this type of analysis across the entire scene, we could weight sounds against each other for their relative values, but also could compare the same sound at different moments, potentially determining that the same sound could have varying values dependent on the ultimate ludic exchange. But it would be nice to have a base standard for measuring these values. For the purpose of this analysis, and possibly at the risk of launching a new digital currency, I'd like to offer a way to measure the value of game audio in the form of a ludic coin. I'll define a ludic coin as a medium of exchange for playability. Ludic coins could be specific to anything that is used for furthering the game, like visual markers, interface interactions, or sound. So I'll be using what I'll call a ludic coin audio, or Luca. So for phrase 3.1, we might value these sounds as 0, 1, and 2 Lucas, respectively. We can apply this type of analysis to the entire scene. Many of the sound cues I've marked as having no ludic value, or 0 Lucas, because they offer no or very little playable exchanges. These include swings by either Mac or Bald Bull, all of the music cues, when referee Mario is counting, crowd noise, and dodging sounds. More valuable are sounds that would provide information necessary for furthering the game. When Mac or Bald Bull actually connects with a punch, that relays important information, as does the block sound. Mario yelling "fight" could be seen as having more value as it indicates the beginning of the round, and cueing the player to prepare for playing rhythmic patterns or listening for sound cues. Other cues may be even more valuable for their ludic potential. The previously mentioned star cue relays important information for the player, as does the knockdown cue. Especially blindfolded, Sinister One doesn't always know Bald Bull's energy level, but upon hearing the knockdown sound, valuable information is presented. I've marked 2 events as having the most Lucas. These are the moments when Bald Bull charges forward. The beginning of this cue is a hugely important moment aurally, as the ludic payoff amounts to either dodging or swinging. We can look specifically at a phrase that contains one of these moments. Phrase 1.6 begins with bald bull bouncing backwards twice, which is event 38. This will be informative for the next event, knowing that there will be 2 instances of the charge or hitting the mat cue. Once event 39 begins, a blindfolded player could use that sound to time their swing. The sound of the swing itself isn't that important, but the sound of the hit is, as opposed to a miss. The knockout sound is also important here, as it signals the elimination of the threat, at least temporarily. Bald bull hitting the mat offers no actual ludic exchange. This phrase also demonstrates how a single sound cue could have different values depending on its context and the nature of its ludic payoff. The charge and hitting the mat cues are actually the same. The full hitting the mat cue is used when opponent falls down, and it involves a single short cue that repeats and fades. And it sounds like this. The charge is only the beginning of this cue, and then repeated equal to the amount of the bounce back cues that we heard in event 38. Again, what I'm analyzing isn't the value of the player's actions to move the game forward, but rather the value of the sounds with their ludic potential. Now, as this analysis is interpretive, I could certainly imagine several alternatives to what I've presented here. Now, let's watch the entire clip again, this time with my added analysis with Lucas. My goal today was to focus on how we might define and use the values of game sounds in some quantifiable way. A lot of our music theoretical research in game audio deals with making sense of certain moments and how we might view them as important. I've offered an analysis of marked cues, which to me evokes scholarship like Robert Hatton's musical markedness. The meaning derived from these marked cues have an added value in game audio if they offer some ludic exchange. There's already work going on to consider how certain cues are exchanged for ludic value, either negatively or positively. I'm thinking of moments of distraction, per Will Ayer's paper, or Julian Grasso's oh shit moments. The latter seems like it might always be of high value, that is, worth lots of lucas. But my hope is that demonstrating the detailed work of analysis and comparative sonic values might help enhance and expand this and other work that is continuing right now. My intent is to build on this work further and determine how it could inform the larger issues that I presented at the start of this paper. Thank you, and I look very much forward to your comments and questions.